okay? For people who have had trouble seeing or hearing, sometimes just refreshing your browser helps. Sometimes leaving and coming back helps. These are the things that we've discovered, and always open to more discoveries along the way. So, I've got a few things that I want to tell you about and talk to you about today. Um, and they're kind of different things from different aspects of what I do. And so I want you to kind of hang with me while we do these things. Um, I'm I'm still doing a little bit of brainstorming, shall we say, a little bit of thinking about the future and what else I can do, what else I can, do to help all of you create your best music, as I sometimes like to say. And by the way, that expression right there, create your best music, right? I mentioned that in one of the posts. That's like a little thing that I came up with as a tagline. I'm kind of liking it, but I don't know if that like if you actually notice that and if it resonates with you. But that's something that I've been saying. In any case, I have another question for you, and I need to get to where I have that. I created a little bit of a poll that I want you all to think about and uh, what am I looking for? I want you to just answer to your best ability the question that I'm about to post in here. So here's the link. I will post it in the chat. What you think? And here's the link. Actually, let me make the link separate so just to make sure. Here we go. And then here comes the link. So the link is all by itself. So what I'd love you to do is to click that link and fill out the poll. So let me tell you what I'm talking about. So those of you who are watching live will see what we're talking about here, but I'm also going to share the poll a little bit more. Let me hit the little preview button so you can see what you're going to see. I want to talk about the idea of core skills. So when I talk about core skills, what I really mean here is what do I mean? I mean the things that everyone, if you're going to be a musician and a creating musician, and this is I'm really focusing on this word create to lump together the idea of composing, improvising, arranging, things that are not just reading someone else's music, right? I mean, that's great too. There's all sorts of skills associated with that, but they're very instrument specific, and most of that it's not the kind of thing I focus on, right? I focus on creating music usually. So I want to think about the core skills that, not like the most advanced things that, only a few people need to learn, or that, you only need to know if you're doing this thing. I'm talking about the things that I think pretty much everyone should have a handle on. And so I've sort of put a list here of some that, and let me just do a quick flip back to the chat. I just want to make sure I'm not losing anything here, because I'll get the chat back on the screen in a minute. But these are some of the things that I came up with. And I left you an other area so you can fill in your own. And I'm not telling you only vote for one. I'm not telling you only vote for three, or you must vote for at least two. Or I don't really care. But realize, I mean, if you put a checkbox by all of them, you might as well not have checked any, right? I want to see which ones get more votes than others to get an idea of where I could be focusing. Eventually, I might do them all, sure. But I want to see where people's interests are, and if I'm missing something, which is entirely possible. I just did this off the top of my head this morning. Let me know. But like one of the ones that I put in here, 4-part SATB writing, there's a lot of skills that go into that, but there's voice leading as part of it. Knowing about chord construction is part of it. There's things you would need to know to do this effectively. So some of them are sort of meta skills that are a little bigger than others. Some of them are really kind of basic, like do we know our keys? Do we know all of our major and minor keys and can make all the scales that go with them? That's a very, very basic foundational skill. Ear training is sort of this big topic that has to do with both sight singing and playing by ear and just being able to translate what you're hearing into music. Things having to do with actual effective notation, whether it's figuring out how to notate rhythms correctly, when to use G sharp versus A flat, all the rules of notation, when do you beam these notes together, and things like that. All sorts of things like that could be one of these skills. So anyhow, I'm interested in knowing what's interesting you in this area, because these are things that I want to be talking about going forward, and we'll have projects, and we'll do things to build these skills. So anyhow, that is my spiel on that. I also am on a related note. I guess this is a small announcement to make. This week, I turned in my resignation from Regis University, where I've been teaching for the last more than 15 years. I forget exactly when I started, 2006 maybe. Maybe it was 2000, but about 15 years I've been teaching there. So it's been a part-time job, so it's not like a full-time thing, but last semester was a pretty heavy workload for me. So yeah, it was a lot of time I spent at the university, a lot of, and I've had great experiences there, fantastic experiences there, but I really want to focus on what I'm doing here more. And so for that reason, as well as other reasons, that just made sense to me career-wise, I'm going to be focusing much more on what I'm teaching here with all of you and any new people we bring on board, so I can reach a worldwide audience rather than just the people at this small Catholic college that I've been teaching at. So anyhow, this is one reason why I'm so interested in knowing how I can best serve you. So that's all the prefatory remarks, I guess, that I would make. So I mentioned that I have a little bit of a focus today specifically on accompaniment. Why? I don't know. Just because it came up. It was, I'm always looking for things to talk about and ways of kind of focusing comment a little bit. And I'm going to bring up a couple of different things. Colleen, I've got your When October Goes ukulele score here. I also want to flip back to over in the community where a couple things were posted that I want to be able to talk about. And one was something that Jim Ivy posted, which was really useful, I thought, and really a good starting point for some conversation, which was this kind of a cheat sheet he made for piano accompaniment. So I want to I want to talk about this. And I had thought I had downloaded this, but then I wasn't seeing it, so apparently I didn't. And now I've got it. So there's that. And then there's a specific arrangement that Jim actually created that uses some of those ideas. And that is this here. And so I want to talk about some of these things and focusing on the idea of accompaniment. And I also want to go MuseScore. I'm going to do a search for MuseScore Open Score Leader. The Leader corpus, it's called, is where there's all these art songs. Tons of art songs that created like classic Romantic era and other art songs that have been entered into MuseScore and fairly painstakingly edited. And I know at least one or two people who are involved in that project are members of this community, and maybe you're watching. And that also reminds me, I want to show you something. And for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to show you on my phone. I was out at a Mexican restaurant last night for dinner, and can we see this? Let me flip over to here and see how well we're seeing. This is not a video, it's just a still picture. But this restaurant used to have mariachis strolling around, and that kind of stopped with COVID. But now there is a harpist there, and so he was playing Mexican songs and other things that he thought people might enjoy on a harp, which he says he built himself. His English wasn't great enough for me to really be able to communicate with him as well as I would have liked. But in any case, yeah, that was really fun to hear him. It was a diatonic harp, I think. That's what I couldn't really. I wish I could really discuss this with him, but I didn't see either pedals or levers. But he did talk about playing in different keys. At one point, he played the same song in two different keys and said he liked this key better. I'm like, how do you do that without levers or pedals? And he held up his tuner, his like actual. So I think he actually retunes the strings between sets, so he can play in different keys. I'm not, to be honest, I don't know what he was up to. But it was fun and interesting because we had just been talking about harp. So, what I want to do is talk then a little bit more about accompaniment. And so, in principle, I can be sharing my keyboard thing with you, but I realized that when I set up my thing with the chat, that I forgot to consider how that was going to work. So you'll have to bear with me a moment while I change my screen share over. So I'm going to change my screen share over to share that window specifically. All right, and then kill that capture and start this capture. Okay, so the question for you now is, if I do this, and yes, I'm assuming you see the whole infinity screen thing, right? But do you see that and the chat together is the question. Are you seeing infinity screen and chat together? And if I switch over to MuseScore, hello MuseScore, where did MuseScore go? There's MuseScore. Do you see MuseScore? Those are the questions for you. So hopefully so. So and if not, you'll have to be letting me know. So I guess when I do this though, I don't see the chat. So yeah, I'll work it out. Don't worry. So I want to talk about accompaniment, and I'll start talking about this piece here. This is, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on all the notes, and Colleen, I know we talked about it some during office hours, and I gave you feedback on specific notes. But I want to talk about this just as a style of accompaniment. So this is a ukulele piece used in what's called chord melody style. And I'll go ahead and flip this here so that we can see. And I think, let me just think for a moment. Oops. Chat. I think I can do this. I don't really know what I'm doing. All right. So here we go. At least I can see the chat now, and maybe you're seeing it twice, and maybe you're not, and I'm not really sure. But in any case, this is what's called chord melody style. And I'll let MuseScore play this here. Okay, right. That's the song "When October Goes" that I had talked about a week or two ago, and posted in the newsletter. And by the way, so I'm wondering when you see Joanne, if you're seeing it twice, are you seeing it once where you can actually type? And then once on screen. If so, that's good. That's the best I can do. If you're seeing it 3 times, that would be a problem that I would need to fix. But twice is what we're expecting. Once is where you can type it, and once you're just seeing it because it's on my screen too. So, so this is what's called chord melody style, in which the ukulele is playing the melody, but it's built in the chords also. Right? So just to play this on the piano, and you can see right off what it's doing. Right? And then so it has the melody being played, but it's also playing chords. And the chords are played like on the downbeats of when the chord changes. This is a really common style for solo guitar music. It's also common for solo ukulele if you're good enough. It's easier to do on guitar because you have more strings with a larger range. On ukulele, it's not that it necessarily takes more physical skill to do, but it definitely takes a little bit more planning to pull this off. And I want to show one of the things that happens here. So what's happened here is, first of all, the range of the ukulele. Oops, sorry, sir. Right? My dog has fleas. That's how you're supposed to tune it. Those are the 4 strings. And they are a little funny in that the lowest string is the 2nd string here. If you think about a ukulele, the bottom string is not the lowest string like it is on every other stringed instrument in the world. And that's because it's such a short instrument that you just can't get a lower note on it. Now the tenor ukulele, and Colleen, I believe you mentioned that you've got a tenor coming, or you have one on, or no, you have one, but you've got a new bass string on order or something, so that you would be able to tune it like this, and that would be, make it sort of a little easier to deal with. But what's happening right now is the 4 strings of a ukulele are right here. And what it means is every time you play a melody note somewhere in this range, the chord is going to be right on top of the melody. Like for instance, right here, the melody goes down to that D. And that D here is almost as low as you can play on the ukulele. And so you can't play a whole chord lower than that note. And this is an issue. So when we talk about accompaniment, I realized that when I worded my little summary of what we were going to talk about, I said the accompaniment is the thing below the melody, or I either wrote that or thought about writing it and then changed my mind. Normally, we think of accompaniment as being below the melody. The melody is higher, like physically on the keyboard higher, or higher in pitch. I guess it's not physically higher, it's physically to the right, but whatever, higher in pitch than the accompaniment. But of course that's not always the case, right? You can have bass voices singing a melody and having accompaniment above that. And usually you pull that off by having them in different instruments. If there's bass voices singing a melody, then you're going to put strings and flutes and things above them. Maybe not so much other voices. Or if it's a trombone melody, you don't put other brass above. I'm not saying you can't do that. I am saying that the norm is to use contrast to help make that melody as clear as possible. If all you got is a ukulele, I'm not, there's nothing wrong with that. It means that you don't have the ability to make those contrasts, and you have to think about how you're going to do this. The reality is, we sort of accept that. It's sort of like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a suspension of disbelief. Like if you're watching Star Trek, as I've talked about before, you sort of accept that transporters are real, and occasionally you accept that time travel is real. Oh, that's tougher for me. But you accept that these things that, or if you're watching whatever, some Lord of the Rings or something like this, there's a certain amount of magic that you accept as real, and then you go on and enjoy the show. So you do some amount of this when you are doing chord melody on an instrument like ukulele. You just accept that maybe that melody is going to have to be not the top note. However, if you want to maybe uh, split the difference on this, maybe what you do is don't bring in the chord right away. So what I'm going to do is lose some of these notes here and then bring them in. I'm gonna use a second voice. I'll use voice 2. And I'll put in some rests and then the rest of the chord. So let me first play it the way it was. Now the way I just changed it. So one way we got to hear ba-da-dum, and then we heard the chord. And then, with sufficient skill in playing the instrument, you bring out the melody. Now, you could try to play all 4 notes and just pluck the D harder than the others. That's a subtle skill, to play a chord with one note louder than the other. You can't do that by strumming. It's going to be a pluck thing, and that's... but here... And then maybe you don't actually come in right on 4. You bring it in on the and or something like that. So so that will help. And of course, yes, Colleen, once you have your low G string, that helps even that much more. So by the way, I'm not sure where you're talking about with the F7. Feel free to tell me, not F major 7, because there's not that chord. Oh, down here. Ah. Okay. Yeah, because the original chord had some other stuff going on in it. But okay, that's all harmony stuff we'll, talk about for another day. But so this idea that you can, even on an instrument like ukulele, separate things out so that the melody gets sounded first and then the accompaniment happens not at the same time. That's a powerful technique. Powerful, powerful, powerful technique. Letting the accompaniment not, if you can't literally get it below the melody, then you at least put it after the melody note has a chance to sound. And what I'm going to do now is flip back over to the leader corpus. And I need to give me a moment. Move tab to another. I need to move it to desk 2. Come on. No? I need to move this to a separate window and then move the window to my desk 2. Here we go. All right. So I'm doing this so that I can do things like the following. It's all tricky. It's all, but now you can see I can get back to where I see my leader corpus and chat at the same time. So this leader corpus here, these are the songs that were entered, and let's just pick one here that I'm not familiar with. Actually, I want to see the Lily Boulanger one, just because I'm curious. She's a well-known composer. I just want to see. So here's an example of something called Recitative. And what I mean by recitative is that the voice is singing while the accompaniment is doing largely nothing. That's an example. I was really happy to find an example of that right off the bat, because that's the idea of what I am talking about here. I am talking about the idea that we can rhythmically change when the accompaniment happens to avoid conflicts. So the thing with the range is one of them. If the accompaniment is going to have to be above the melody, and that's going to be a little unclear. If it's consistently above, we can learn to accept it. More suspension of disbelief. But if it's like the melody has mostly been on top of the chord and then it jumps below, now we have a problem. And you can solve it with rhythmic things by moving the accompaniment into the cracks. So this idea here, where we have melody moving while the accompaniment is not moving, that's really powerful. As is this. Check this one out. This is the other really typical thing to have happen here. So what happened here is we have a melody note that sounds with a chord, and then there's a bass note that happens after that. Then the melody moves, right? The melody moves, and then we get the chord. And, you know, I'm sight reading this and not really thinking about it. And then the melody moves, and then the chord. And then the melody moves, and then the chord. Blah, blah, right? So by doing this thing of let's move the melody, now we move the chord. Now we move the melody, now we move the chord. Or the accompaniment, I should say. Move the melody, then move accompaniment. Move melody, then move accompaniment. That style is unbelievably powerful. And it's a really, really common way of doing things if the accompaniment has the potential to be distracting. So there's any number of places where we might have a song where we go, I just made up that melody and stuff, but is my melody, and then accompaniment, and then accompaniment. Right? So I'm having this back and forth, this call and response between the melody and the accompaniment, which is, it's a very practical thing for solo piano, because as a solo pianist, I can't, I mean, yes, I can play Bach and I can learn to work all these different voices all at once and all, but it's tricky and it takes practice and it's difficult to pull off while improvising. And then it sounds like Bach. I mean, it doesn't have to sound like Bach, but there's other styles here. And this call and response style between moving the melody and then playing some accompaniment. Someone should finish this song for me. And I know Humble New Music, if you're watching, you will probably take up that challenge because you like to do that kind of thing. But anyhow, that's boo-da, 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 doo-da. Yeah, that's a nice little song. But so that accompaniment there. Now also, even if it's a song that I'm just singing, I'm going to return back to When October Goes and think now not about this ukulele arrangement, but I want to think about singing it. And do I remember the words? I just had the words in my head. And when October goes. Okay, so, and when October goes, the same old dream appears. That's the second verse, I think. But we'll just go with that. If I want to accompany myself playing that, I might do something like, and when October goes, the same old dream appears, and then put in these little accompaniment fills in the cracks. I have cracks there where a note is being held out. And when October goes, and I keep this simple here, and then put in my accompaniment fills in that crack. The same old dream appears. And you are in my arms. He does that. I remember Barry Manilow plays a sharp 11 going to a fifth. to share the happy, happy years. And then another little fill. This idea of filling in cracks is an important part of accompaniment as well. So looking for these opportunities, and this is essentially what I did here, but this was one that I needed to do. This wasn't like an optional fill just to fill rhythmic space. This was a fill I needed to do so I could play the chord and not have it in the way of the melody. But also I'm talking about doing fills to fill rhythmic space. That's why we call them fills. There's space because the melody has essentially stopped. It's holding a long note or it's resting. These are places where accompaniment can then pick up the slack. And so that's an important principle that you see used quite a lot. And if I go back to the whatchamacallit here, I can't think and talk at the same time. Have you noticed that? I go back to the window where the open score leader corpus is. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, look at what is. Oh, this isn't finished. This is just a tempo. This just got the melody. So that's the deal. So because this is being actively worked on, people are actively contributing to this open score leader corpus, and so there's pieces that are still being worked on. So I'm just gonna hop over to a few other examples because I want to show something else typical. So anytime we look at Schubert, that's like one of the the kings of this. Impromptu counter melodies. Yes, that is totally what we're talking about. Counter melodies, and they don't even have to be melodies. They could be rhythmic. They could be more rhythmic things. Just so, right? That wasn't melodic. It was just a rhythmic statement of something. But yeah, or it could be, right? It could be something more melodic. It's something accompanying the melody. So the idea that you can do that kind of activity in the cracks is important. Like here, if we look at Schubert, he is very, I won't say he's like always doing this, but there's a really typical thing that will happen where the accompaniment might actually echo the melody. This is real common in art song accompaniments like this, or pop sheet music. If you look at the sheet music to any pop song, usually the accompaniment has the melody built into it. So check out this. So in that melody was totally echoed in the piano part. Right? And then black screen. Oh, thank you. Gonna be one of those days. Looks good to me, so yes, you might need to do whatever you did to fix it last time. Because I think I'm still good at my end, but maybe someone else can confirm. It looks like really not the screen. That is so. I really apologize for the fact that live streaming is, maybe live streaming just is technology that's just not as well developed as one would like. I always had issues on the other platform, and we get issues on this one too, and it's just seems to be life here. So I'm going to just take another quick look around to see if there's anything else going on that looks like I could be dealing with. But I don't know. I think things are, from my end, all in order as far as I can tell. So I'm just going to have to hope for the best here. Audio cutting out. Yeah, so if audio is cutting out, there is, I guess, one other thing I should check, and that is coming back to my device settings. Yeah, I've got cancel echo. I've got optimize for voice turned off, which is what I want. Let me just change this again. And, all right. Well, we're going to hope that, things basically work. And if not, then I apologize. And Yeah, I'll keep thinking, keep testing, and so forth. So Dennis, you said you had to re-enter, but I assume that means things are better. Okay, so let me just try to continue, and if audio's a problem, then maybe it'll be better in the recording, and if not, then I apologize, but we'll do our best. So uh, what I'm saying here is the piano part is basically just echoing the melody, right? And filling it out with chords. And that's a real typical art song accompaniment approach. And by art song, yeah, I mean this kind of stuff. The Lieder songs. Lieder is German for songs, right? But then there's like little places where the melody is moving more, having those triplets, and then the accompaniment is a little simpler, just the quarter note. Then there's other places where the melody is holding on to the E, and then the accompaniment starts moving. Yeah, I'm really sorry, folks, about audio stuttering and whatnot, and there's just, let me make sure my internet is connected, Ethernet connected. Everything I'm doing from my end should be as good as it can get. I guess we'll find out if the recording's better, because that'll at least prove that I'm sending information okay. But yeah, we'll just see. So I'll just keep talking, keep playing, and see where we go. So this idea is kind of like that idea of the fills, right? The melody's holding bound, and then triumphed. Sorry. I can speak a little German, or at least know how to pronounce it. So the accompaniment is moving, like here, during that crack where the melody is holding a note. And then it moves with the melody. So while the melody is moving, it's not trying to do anything complicated. While the melody is moving, it's just kind of either holding something. If the melody is moving, like here, we're just holding a chord. Or if the melody is moving, it's moving with the melody. Anytime it does something more complicated than that, it does it in the cracks between, like while a melody note is being held. That's just super common. That's just a common way of organizing accompaniment. So the other common way that I want to talk about gets back to Jim Ivey here. So I want to open up his couple of scores here. Jim has this arrangement he did of At the Devil's Ball. So good setup. Good comments there, Jim. And yeah, I'm going to try my best to sort things out and understand what could be going on. So, okay, so that's the beginning of this piece, and really nice arrangement. It's a nice song and a nice, just straightforward arrangement. And here I want to talk about another style as to what's going on here. So here, instead of incorporating the melody into the accompaniment, which if you think about it, Colleen's version did that, right? Colleen's, well, not her version, but her When October Goes had this chord melody style where the same instrument was playing the melody and the accompaniment. In the Schubert example, the voice had the melody, the piano had accompaniment, but the piano accompaniment incorporated the melody. In the Boulanger version, and I'm just making up French pronunciation, it was more of a dialogue, right? The piano wasn't typically doing what the melody was doing. This is also a version, Jim's version here is also one in which the piano is not doing what the melody is doing. But it's not trying to stay out of the melody's way either, as the Boulanger version was doing. What this is what we would call a repeating pattern. And repeating patterns they're another one of these sort of suspension of disbelief things where once you accept that this pattern is just kind of repeat, it disappears into the background. and then we don't hear the pattern anymore. We can now focus on the melody. Now we accept that there's going to be this, right? There's going to be this kind of alternating thing going on. And once the ear accepts that, which takes all of about a second, because we're so used to that pattern. If it's a more complicated pattern, it might it might really occupy our ears and brain more. But a really familiar pattern like this just instantly disappears into the background and allows us to focus on the melody. So repeating patterns as an accompaniment pattern is really uh, a powerful tool. So repeating patterns are really common in certain styles of music, especially popular music, right? So popular music does this. And so by popular music, I mean Irving Berlin. I mean, he was popular in 1913, right? So typical stride piano. Yes, it's a stride piano type of approach. Now, this I'm gonna come back to. I want to come back to the leader corpus and then come back here, but I want to talk about the idea of stride piano. Stride piano. So there's a couple words that we want to think about here. One is ragtime, right? Ragtime is a style of music which has this kind of alternating left hand pattern while there's stuff going on in the right hand. I mean, that's not a definition of ragtime. It's just a typical characterization of it, and it's all composed. As soon as you start doing that, now I'm playing improvised stuff in my right hand while doing the back and forth thing. Now it's stride piano. That distinction between stride piano and ragtime is largely just composed versus improvised. Yeah, you could talk about subtle things here and there that are different about it, more fluctuations and rhythms that might happen in stride or whatever. But to a rough approximation, stride piano and ragtime mean the same thing. And it's a left hand repeating pattern with right hand playing melody. What's going on here is a simplification of that in which it's the whole pattern in both hands. In other words, we're not trying to do this in one hand while playing a melody in the right. This simplifies life immensely. This is hard. Playing, like, I can do this. If I think about it, I have to read it, and I can pull this off slowly, but I can, I can do that all day long. Right? Because as fast as you want. That's simple to do. If I got two hands to do it, and because I don't have to worry about the melody, that's really easy. So as a pure accompaniment style, and which this is, it's accompaniment style, it doesn't have to have the melody built into it, this becomes really easy to play. And so then you can focus on, well, then what kind of patterns do I use? And that's what Jim's other handout here is kind of about, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I do want to flip back to the leader corpus to point out that that idea of accompaniment patterns is fairly common. And I kind of see it. Okay, yeah, here's a good example here. All right, you get the idea? We got this, and the first time you hear, I'm like, oh my God, what's that piano doing? It's doing all this stuff. But at some point, it's just stuff, and then you can start focusing on the melody again. So, what that says is, yeah, you can have a fairly active pattern like that is, and notice that this pattern. Sometimes composers might strive to work the melody note into the pattern. But I noticed that that's not actually the case here. The melody note here is the C, and the pattern is the rest of the triad. Oh yeah, check that. C major, F minor, C. It's 1 minor 4 1. Right, that's my favorite little 1 minor 4 to 1. I mean, not that has to start with 1, but it's that minor 4 that I always talk about so much in the key of C, because at this point we seem to be in C, even though the key signature is not agreeing. but at least for this passage we are. So you see that that C is deliberately left out of that accompaniment pattern. The accompaniment pattern has the rest of the triad, so that the melody and the accompaniment pattern together spell the triad. And then the same, so when it's the C chord, we have C, and then E and G in the accompaniment. When it's the F minor chord, it's C in the melody and A flat and F in the accompaniment, so that it's still the three notes of the F minor triad, but split up. So two of them are in the accompaniment and one is in the melody. So yes, sometimes you might see people writing, like, someone else might have written that with the C as part of the pattern, or yeah, I'm trying to think about how to something in which the pinky is holding on to that C, or maybe doing in this octave where it's actually incorporating the melody note. So sometimes you see that happen in these things. I want to say like yeah, I don't know. It's sometimes you see the melody incorporated into these sorts of patterns, and sometimes you don't. So so this is a version in which the accompaniment pattern is a repeating pattern, but it doesn't incorporate the melody. So now let's talk about the actual patterns that that Jim's talking about here. So the actual patterns that he has going here, let me just do a quick flip back here just to see if I do still seem to be broadcasting and all. So I just always want to check that, because if I don't see comments in chat after being told that there's technical problems, I wonder if I'm just talking to myself. So this pattern here is basically a root and fifth, right? It's alternate. So it's, first of all, it's alternating a bass note and a chord, bass note, 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 chord, right? So this is that kind of typical basic stride pattern, and you can play it as in one hand only if you're good enough, if you practice it. And yes, you simplify the chords to be able to do it a little faster. Like instead of playing all three of these notes here, maybe I just do this. Because this, I don't have to move my hand around, right? I can just leave. Who carries coins around with them anymore? If you've got I sometimes would put a penny on people's wrist while they would play to try to get them to not move their hand, to see what can we do that doesn't involve like a lot of hand jumping. And not that that's like you should never move your hand, but anyhow, there's situations when that's useful, that you keep your hand moving as little as possible to be able to do certain things, whereas this is going to require jumping around. This pattern here, though, it's the same pattern whether I do it in one hand or whether I do it in two hands like this. It's the same basic pattern, right? So, but you don't have to worry about simplifying it so much. I can play the full three-note chord pretty easy. I can play the full three-note chord really easy if I got two hands to do it with. If I got one hand to do it with, then if I only have one hand to do it with, it's more jumping, and I'm more likely to want to not have the three-note chords. So pay attention now to the actual notes here. The bass notes are the root and the fifth of the chord, usually. Root, fifth, and then root, fifth, and then root, fifth, and then this one is, instead of root, fifth, or root, fifth, in this one he's chosen to go root, third. And that's always a valid choice, but it's especially a valid choice here. Why? Because this is the leading tone. We're going to have I'm slowing down the pattern so you can see it's the G, G, B, C, right? So it's got that idea of the B resolving to the C, leading tone. So anytime putting the third of the chord there allows you to get stepwise motion into the next chord, that's a possible reason to consider using the third. Basically, that happens anytime there's the circle of fifths. So that could have happened here. A, C, D, F, G, or D, F, G, B. Right? Could have used thirds any of those places. Any of these places where the chords are going around the circle of fifths. The third allows you to step up, but especially here when it's the actual leading tone and you get the half step. So these are kind of personal choices. You decide when do you want to use the fifth, when do you want to use the third. One of the determining factors might be the melody note. If the melody note's got the leading tone, maybe I don't want to double it in the bass because that's a little too much leading tone. But if the melody's not the leading tone, then maybe I do use it to emphasize the leading tone that much more. So these are considerations. Now he's got this other pattern. So here, instead of, so it's basically the same thing for the first three beats. That was the exact same first three beats as this. But here, instead of putting a chord on beat 4, he's putting in passing tones. Boo, boo, dum. And now here he's doing exactly that thing of using a third to get me there. And it could have been boo da dum, a chromatic passing tone on the way down, but he's using a third instead, and then he is using the chromatic passing tone there. So that idea is also just really, really, really powerful, right? And when I say powerful, I mean that you can actually do an awful lot of pretty good accompaniment this way. You know, the really skilled pianists will find ways of varying this and they got tired of keeping a same pattern going for very long. But if you're writing out kind of a sheet music arrangement, your idea isn't to throw people curveballs and make them mess up every measure. It's to establish a pattern that they can then play pretty easily. That's part of the purpose of writing out sheet music, is to give you a nice playable thing, and then the jazz pianists who want to improvise their own stuff can do that, right? Typically you don't try to write complicated patterns for people. This is a simpler pattern, right, where it has basically just beats 1 and 2 and nothing on 3 and 4. And one reason for that is the assumption that the melody is is moving. And if the melody is moving, maybe we don't need the accompaniment to move at all. This gets back to what I talked about of the timing of alternating between the melody and the accompaniment. So this idea, you know, assuming that your melody is moving there on beats 3 and 4, this works really well. Now, the reality is a lot of melodies don't move on beats 3 and 4 all the time, because when the long notes happen, like so here, right? We have, let's pretend this was a ballad. So far, so good. This measure here, nothing happened on beat 3. Well, I played half notes. I should have been playing quarter notes. Nothing happened on beat 3 there, right? If I'd done that everywhere else, though, so if I put that hit, the chord hit there on beat 2, it sort of presupposes that something is happening on beat 3. So if your melody is moving, you can do that. If your melody, though, just has a whole note, or in this case, dotted half note, then you have to, you might want to think about moving then. Or go ahead and play that bass note there on beat 3. So Joanne, this handout is something that Jim posted to the community, so it's in that share and discuss space. Do I have it handy still? It's basic stride piano. Yeah, it's in the share and discuss space. It's one of the more recent things posted anyhow. But yeah, I only post it in there because it is a useful thing. So I'm going to post it into the chat. There you go. So where am I going? Coming back here. Okay. So yeah, so this idea of moving. Now, the other thing is instead of literally playing this as so live streams have been ending before I finish talking at the end. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, excellent. Good to know. Good feedback. Okay, because yeah, I am approaching the end. Instead of literally playing quarter note dotted half, a really typical thing would happen is more of a Charleston rhythm. So Charleston rhythm, dun 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 ba da ba. Right? Maybe you know that song, maybe you don't, but it's from that same era, and it's really short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. That's how the original Charleston goes. But anything that has that rhythm of basically one and of two, we sometimes refer to as a Charleston rhythm, and 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 1, 2, and. So I'm playing this chord 1, playing it on the and of 2. This helps fill the measure out a little bit more. Use Jim's handout for the fugue? Seriously? I don't think I believe you. Do I believe you? Maybe it has that. Maybe it had that chord progression 1 6 2 5. I don't know. Or maybe use those passing tones in there. I'll have to think about that. But good to know about the abrupt endings. So I will keep that in mind. So I guess I just have to wait for that whole delay thing that happens. What am I saying here? By moving that chord to the and of 2, it shortens that space at the end of the measure that you're leaving naked, right? It's more like playing 1 and 3, which of course you could play 1 and 3, but an and of 2 just has a little more lilt to it. You could play 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3. You could do that, but it starts to feel square. Instead of doing that, you might want to, 1, and things like that. And that way, you're still mostly filling out the measure equally, but not squarely is the best way I can look at it. Now you've got a little more leeway into where your melody can be filling these cracks. But again, if the melody doesn't fill in the cracks, then here's a time when you throw in one of these bass notes. Okay, I'm going to check out your measure 26. I got to do it now. I got to do it. So I've got I do have your fugue. So come on. Oh. Except MuseScore has decided to lock up. No, it's just not opening my file thing. Oh well. I'm not going to worry about it then. It's not locked. It just won't open the file dialog. There it is. So measure 26 of Humble New Music's fugue. All right, well, that is an A minor chord and a D minor chord. So yeah, you do have those chords in there. I guess that's probably the thing, and it's sort of a bass chord kind of pattern there. It's snuck in there pretty well. Yeah, pretty sneaky. Anyhow, the last thing that I would say about this is the chord voicing itself. Notice where he's keeping it. He's keeping it around middle C here. I often refer to the chord voicings in this kind of accompaniment style, or a lot of accompaniment styles, as being like icebergs. And the thing that we all learn about icebergs in school, the things that we learned about icebergs in school before we learned they were melting, is that only 10% of them is above water. For some, whether or not that's literally true, I remember learning it, that most of the iceberg is underwater, below sea level. Sea level. So when we play these chords, we want to voice them in such a way that that the chord is barely above water. A little bit of it is at middle C or above. A little bit of it is above middle C. This chord is a little below water here, and that's okay. It could dip in, but maybe it's better off actually here, so a little bit of the above water, but then the left hand has to work harder if it's just left hand. So here, if it's just left hand, I would keep it a little more below water. But that's the idea. You want to keep the range of those chords to be relatively consistent so that from good voice leading perspective, I'm singing the top note of the voicing. And the nice thing is, if the top note connects smoothly, they all got to connect smoothly because the hand isn't going to separate its fingers, right? If the top note of the chord is got good voice leading, you can pretty well expect that the rest of the notes in the chord must have good voice leading too. So yeah, I see what you mean. This left hand here, boop, 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 boop. That's definitely, or I guess it'd B flat at that point. But yeah, so I can see that that's kind of going on in there, and the key that you've moved to. So those are some of the things that I had to say about accompaniment. It kind of touched on a lot of different topics, but yeah, it's a deep, big topic, and hopefully something in there was of use to people. So I am wrapping up now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up and give you a chance to acknowledge that you've heard me say that I'm wrapping up. And I'll play the music to end out here. And turn down this so I can talk over it a little better. And so this has been the Music Masterclass, and it's yeah, June 30th, last day of June. And so yeah, next month I want to start something new here, and that's why again that poll. So if you came in late, scroll back up in the chat and find where I posted the link to this poll, where I'm just asking for your feedback on what kinds of things you might want to what might the things you might want us to be talking about that you want to work on. I want to give you projects to work on, give you assignments and stuff like that, and I'll make up, of course, it won't be a whole full thing like I did with the jazz piano holiday thing. Eventually I'm going to do more things like that, but there'll be some sort of in-between ground that I'll be exploring also. And so yeah, I'm just go ahead and fill out that poll. Let me know what topics you're going to find the most useful. So thanks everyone, and I'm going to stop talking and then wait a few more seconds and then hit the end button. So because I guess that's what makes the most sense. So I'm just going to sit here and smile for a few seconds.